In the Star Trek fandom system, episodes are analyzed by two groups: the Trekkies, who look at the plots, and the philosophers, who look at the moral lessons. These are their stories. Hello, folks, and welcome to Trekosophy, the courtroom drama edition. Joining us today, our fearless leader. He's out of order, you're out of order, this whole place is out of order. It's Ben McLean.
Oh, Sue.
And our neighbor from the north, if he was the man he was 10 years ago, he would take a flamethrower to this place. It's Brandon Kirby.
Good day, good day.
And our technical guru, when the judge said order in the court, he asked for a turkey on rye, hold the mayo. It's Chris McGee.
Can't stand mayonnaise.
And I am Bill Allen, a.k.a. the bailiff in the red shirt.
That's funny.
Well done, Bill. Well done.
Thank you. And tonight we're talking about rules of engagement.
Specifically, it is the Deep Space Nine 4th season episode that we're talking about.
Yeah, and what was the situation? I think we need to talk about, what was the situation between the Federation and the Klingon Empire right at this point?
At this point, because it's the 4th season, in fact, they even mentioned it in this episode, if I'm not mistaken. The Federation and the Empire aren't exactly friends, but they're not exactly enemies either. It's kind of an uncomfortable standoff, I guess you could say.
Yeah, the Klingons have started their war with the Cardassians, and they basically told the Federation, you either help us, or if we see you, we'll shoot at you.
Mm-hmm.
I think at one point there was even some veiled threats that since the Klingons were planning on taking all Cardassian territory, and Deep Space Nine was a former Cardassian territory, the Klingons were planning to lay claim to the station. Or did they try that in an earlier episode?
Well, they had tried to lay claim to it. It wasn't successful.
Right.
But they did give it an attempt.
Not technically at war, but not really hesitating to shoot at each other. Not really shooting at each other. It's not an open war. The Klingons don't do neutral. The Federation was trying to stay neutral. Klingons just have people helping them shoot at others or people they're shooting at. And there's a humanitarian mission. The Cardassians are trying to ship medical supplies to one of their colonies. And the Federation says, yeah, we can help with that because that's, not taking sides. That's just food and medicine. Mm-hmm. And Worf's first job captaining the Defiant is... Is
that even a word, captaining?
Yes.
Commanding?
It is now.
Okay.
It is now. He's the captain.
We're powerful people. We can make words up.
We did. The whole show is a made-up word. So Worf's first job as the center chair for Defiant is just a simple little escort run. Protect the freighter from point A to point B, and in between there it gets jumped by some Klingons. He opens fire, and that's when things get interesting.
Memory Alpha basically says the Klingons try to extradite Worf after he accidentally destroys a transport full of Klingon civilians. What's happened is there is a particular maneuver that Worf was accomplishing during the battle. They've seen one of the Klingon birds of prey perform a certain maneuver over and over again, and so they decided, we're going to catch them by surprise this time. The next time they uncloak, we're going to hit them before they even have a chance to fully uncloak. They did that, and it turns out when it did fully uncloak, it was not the Klingon bird of prey, but a civilian transport. And it immediately exploded. So, that's why the Klingons are trying to extradite him. They believe that he just, murdered a whole bunch of civilians during this battle, because he, employed a very unreliable tactic, I suppose.
Well, at least they say that's what they believe.
Right, and it turns out, we can go ahead and spoil it.
Well, look. Wait, let's be clear. Trekosophy, when we do a Trekosophy episode, it's generally for people who have already seen the episode. or who have
Yeah. Or we
who-
can say, if you haven't seen it yet, go ahead and pause this episode. Go watch it. You can find it on Netflix or anywhere else just about. Then come back.
And Rosebud is a sled.
It's
No,
over 20 years old. Well, actually, no. Actually, this episode is not over 20 years old. How old was this episode? Let me look at the air date.
97?
96.
April 8th, 1996.
17 years.
Just over 17 years.
It's not of legal age yet, so you can't exploit it.
But I think it's way past the statute of limitations on spoilers, so we can go ahead and spoil
Let's
it.
spoil away.
What happens is, it turns out, they look at the manifest list for those civilians that were on the transport, and they find out that they had died actually previously. How long ago was it? Like a week or a month or something?
Right.
Previously. All the exact same people on a transport had died about a month previous to this accident. And the Klingons had set up Worf by projecting a false image of a civilian transport and providing this manifest list. Or is that the right word for a list of passengers? Manifest? No, that's not.
Yeah, that'll work.
Yeah.
Providing this false passenger list. And just to get him to be convicted of murder and get him back to the home world where they can have their way with him. Thankfully...
Well, it's not even really that they care about Worf directly. They're trying to accomplish something in the negotiations with the Federation that will remove the Federation's sort of their moral high ground.
Right.
Yeah. Make them seem a little bit more like the bad guys.
And basically make it possible for the Klingon Empire to retain its conquests of certain worlds near the Cardassian border, former Cardassian colonies, if I remember right, without the Federation still having any grounds to contest it. And it's a very complicated political situation, but basically, Worf is being framed for political reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And thanks to the wonderful maneuvering by Captain Sisko, they were able to discover the truth, and the Klingon lawyer basically withdrew his request for the extradition.
Well, I don't know that he withdrew, because from a Klingon or a Kantian perspective, he had made his case. And any good Kantian would have said, Chopak wins hands down, but Vulcans, being utilitarians, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, ruled against him. But Chopak had adequately established, not only in his mind and in our minds, but in Worf and in Sisko's minds, that his motivation when he fired on the ship was bloodlust. Worf he fantasized about conquering a city and then burning it to the ground and killing all the civilians. That was his fantasy life. He hated the Klingons and wanted to get back into battle with them, and he wanted them to attack so he could kill some Klingons. That was what his desire was, and what his motivation was hardly becoming of a Starfleet captain. But the Vulcan, who's a utilitarian, said, okay, well, I'm not interested in the motivation of the action, I'm interested in the effect. Well, there is no ill effect, and so I'm going to let it go. But if you're a Klingon, and if you're a Kantian, it's an enormous problem that Worf's heart wasn't in the right place.
Well, the reason we wanted to have this episode was so we could get into this issue here. Brandon, in his book, goes into this episode somewhat, and he has a valid point of the Vulcans being utilitarians, but I would argue that this lawyer guy is just a scumbag, more of a Machiavellian than Kantian.
Well, let me ask you this question. I'm sorry to interrupt, but let me ask this. Was Chopak in on the deception, or was he just doing his duty and he honestly did not realize that the High Council or whatever was trying to set up Worf?
The
Frame war.
the episode does not disclose that, but it does show him lying on multiple occasions.
When did he lie?
Yeah, I was going to ask that. Go ahead.
Right. In his first confrontation with Captain Sisko, the Klingon lawyer complains that the Federation system of justice, he complained that it wasn't based on fact. You know, it emphasizes procedure over fact. And he tried to give Captain Sisko every indication that he was going to contest the facts of the case. And then in the first actual argument, he completely abandons the whole idea of he doesn't contest any of the facts.
Well, that's Kantian.
Sounds like sloppy writing. I don't know.
I would say that you could justify that, though. I mean, he is somewhere in there. He did talk about how he's still a warrior at heart. He just fights on the battlefields of the courts instead of, out there in the blood and the guts.
Well, yeah, but in that action and giving intentionally giving Captain Sisko that false impression, and then switching when it comes to the actual argument, he's violating the categorical imperative.
No, well, he was being an excellent philosopher at that point. I don't agree with you at all here, Ben.
He's used Captain Sisko as a means rather than as an end.
No. The Klingons have used Worf as a means rather than an end, and that's not very conscious.
That's true. It happens on several levels. I mean.
No, but it's important to note, though, that Kantian ethics is not based on empirical fact. It's based on a priori reasoning. And the difference there is very important because empirical fact, what you can glean from them will only give you general laws, i.e. science, physics. It doesn't give you absolute laws. It gives you general laws. Kant said a general law in ethics doesn't grant you a moral obligation because it only grants you moral relativism. Here's a principle that may or may not be true in the circumstance that you're in. There's no obligation to carry that out. Okay, well, I should do no harm. Well, what if I'm a dentist? I might have to hurt somebody to get the job done. So all of a sudden, your principle that you've articulated based on empirical fact, well, action X is a form of harm, that sort of thing only gets you moral relativism. Kant says useless. Moral relativism is of no value when contemplating ethics. It's a priori. It's prior to looking at any sort of fact, prior to any experience. Those sorts of judgments, 2 + 2 = 4. I don't need to count apples to know that. It might be useful in education, but it's true regardless of the situation that I'm in. That's an a priori fact. Kant is looking for something prior to the experience. And so what Chapak does as a brilliant philosopher, okay, he's a sophist. As a brilliant sophist, what he does is say, I accept all of your facts, and I'm going to make my case arguing on your premises. I'm not going to say your crew is dishonest in filing their reports, because quite frankly, you don't believe that. I'm going to accept something that you already believe and then make my case. Let's say his reports are valid. Let's say his log entries are valid. His log entries suggest Worf was in a state of bloodlust. And let's make my case from that. Prior to going into the situation, Worf wanted to kill Klingons. In that sense, it's supremely Kantian.
Well, if that scene was all by itself, and you assume that the Klingon lawyer means everything he says, and you take it at face value, then yeah, that's fine. But I think he's only pretending to be a Kantian because he's contradicting something he said earlier. In an earlier scene, he complained to Captain Sisko that the Federation system of justice emphasizes procedure over fact. You remember that?
Yeah.
Procedure over
Procedure
fact.
over substance.
He
Form
is
over
deceiving.
fact.
In that scene,
Chris,
since he doesn't plan to argue on fact, in that scene he's deceiving Captain Sisko.
Well, now didn't he follow it up and say, "I look forward to fighting on this battlefield
Says, I'm
on
sorry
your
to
terms"?
It'll put you at a disadvantage. On the contrary, I look forward to fighting on your terms.
Yeah, and it's an enormous difference. Form over facts. The substance
Yeah, but
of,
he's suggesting there that the
I know what you're saying. You're suggesting that he willingly deceived Cisco. Well, actually, wait. Come to think of it, this is probably Kirby's win here, because he's talking about the system of justice that the Federation has, emphasizing form over fact, procedure over substance. But he doesn't say that the facts don't matter, does he? He doesn't
well,
come out and say that.
I think at some point he says
Or the facts do matter.
Truth is something to be won.
Yeah, the truth must be won. I'll see you on the battlefield.
I think he said that. Yeah, the truth must be won. And so, in that sense, he's not really interested in empirical facts. But I don't think that makes him any less of a Kantian. That's my point. I don't think that makes him a sniveling toad. I just don't think that makes him. He's not a Vulcan idealist. He's a Klingon. He's interested in what's in your heart. What was your duty in the situation? Worf had a duty to be a good Starfleet captain. Was he? No, he wasn't. He totally ignored Starfleet regulations, fired before confirming what the target was, an egregious breach of sanity, and as a result, he deserved to be extradited. The Vulcan didn't see it that way because there was no ill consequence to his action. Because the Vulcan's a utilitarian and the Klingon was a Kantian.
I think part of it is it's like the two phrases Ben used. He said, if you take what he says at face value, if you look at it on the surface of things, and it's like that's the key. If you look at it on the surface of things, yeah, he looks like he tricked him. But that's because this lawyer's playing that deeper game. Face value, what he says is true. He doesn't actually lie. He just presents the truth a certain way, which to some people is a lie, but at the same time, it's not an intentional falsehood. He's not cheating.
Well, that's true. He's giving a context to the truth, but at the same time, it's a context that Worf and Sisko accept, and that's good philosophy. You don't argue based on your own facts. You argue based on your opponent's facts or your audience's facts. That's what makes you a good philosopher. And he argues based on the truth of a Starfleet report. And in the end, Worf came to realize this guy's right. I wasn't in the right mindset. And Worf got lucky.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure of that myself. I rather think that if you jump out at a group of soldiers in the middle of a firefight and you get shot, I just think that's too bad for you because that was a really stupid place to be. I mean, I
agree with that.
That is another side of it. What freighter captain in his right mind is going to decloak in the middle of a firefight? Mm-hmm. That's not a good place to be. Yeah. If you're cloaked, you slink away quietly.
Unless systems were experiencing malfunctions or something like that. But
why would a freighter captain have a cloaking device in the first place?
Yeah, that's another point to make too. Do all Klingon ships have cloaking devices?
I'd be willing to guess at this point they probably do because, the cloaking technology is, 70, 80 years old?
Yeah.
Well, they can see through all the old cloaks. In order to have a cloaking device in the Star Trek universe that actually works against Federation ships like the Defiant, which is top of the line, you have to have a top of the line brand new cloaking device because old cloaking devices don't still work. They've been penetrated.
Well, at the same time, though, those old cloaking devices are just fine if the Defiant's not looking for you. You can sail. There have been instances where Federation ships without cloaking devices have entered foreign territory, broadcast the right transponder code, and gotten through because they weren't looked at too closely. And if the Defiant's sitting there shooting at a bunch of warbirds that are birds of prey, excuse me. Romulans have warbirds, Klingons have birds of prey, even if they're the same ship.
Especially
if the
when they're the same ship.
Yeah. If the Defiant's looking at a bunch of birds of prey and in the middle of a firefight, it's not really going to be looking at the cheap cloaking device. It's tracking the active hostile target. So it's possible you could sneak by with a crappy cloaking device. And then most freighters, their big threat wouldn't be a top-of-the-line warship. It would be pirates. It would be guys who are a little over-eager to find salvage that may or may not be salvaged yet. So any kind of cloaking device is better than none because not every enemy is going to have top-of-the-line sensor suite.
Well, let me ask you this. At what point do we stop making up excuses for the writer's lazy writing?
Well, let's not even do that.
I think this is a bit of a red herring. I mean, look at it like this. Imagine you're in World War II in a foxhole, and there's bullets whizzing all around you, and suddenly a whole bunch of guys in front of your foxhole, which is obviously facing the Germans, jump up over your foxhole. I mean, I think you'd be negligent as a soldier if you didn't shoot first and ask questions later, because, you know, you're kind of there to defeat the enemy, you know, or at least to preserve the lives of your companions.
Well,
and I mean, if you just jump up in front of a soldier in the middle of a firefight and you get shot, I don't think you can blame the soldier. That's not reasonable.
It depends on the soldier's training.
Any military situation that is not reasonable. I mean, we're
going under the assumption that the Federation has some sort of regulation stating that you have to check your target before you fire upon it.
Well, yeah, Cisco pretty much flat out says that to Worf. It's what makes the Federation the Federation. Yeah, you don't shoot first.
And I think that was the whole point of the episode. The Klingon actually won that argument.
Mm-hmm.
Worf was not in a good frame of mind when he made the decision to fire.
I'm disagreeing with Cisco at the end of the episode here.
Okay, you're also disagreeing with Worf about his own self-assessment.
Yes, I am. Worf is very deceived about himself much of the time.
There you go. Ben McLean knows more about Worf than Worf.
Well, obviously, I have the omnipotent perspective of the television viewer.
Uh-huh.
I think he's got you there. Now, I would say though that I mean, it wasn't Worf's state of mind that really mattered, because there are great captains with rather unstable states of mind that tend to say, damn the regulations, I'm going to do what I want to do. Can anybody say James T. Kirk?
Oh, yeah. If Kirk was in that situation, he
would have done the same thing. Yeah. Actually, if Kirk was in that situation, he would have shot at it while it was still cloaked and he didn't know where it was and managed to hit it. Because that's Kirk. Kirk's got a little Klingon. I'm just saying. Yeah,
what would have happened? What would have happened is Chekhov would have scanned and said, "Oh, it's a civilian transport." And Kirk would have said, "Fire!"
Yeah, that's probably what would have happened.
Oh, Klingons! I hate Klingons.
The point, I don't think it was Worf's state of mind that was the major contributor, whatever his state of mind was. I mean, honestly, you want somebody a little trigger happy when you're going up against Klingons because you're going to get shot at and you're going to need to do some shooting. It was Worf's inexperience. This was his first time in the center seat. So he made a judgment call, and it was the wrong call. He lived to make another one, and he'll get it right next time. But, I mean, his state of mind, while it may have been a Klingon bloodlust kind of thing, was the right state of mind for the given situation.
Well, sure. If I'm traveling down a dark alley and people are coming my way and looking at me greedily, I want a Klingon bloodlust person walking next to me. I don't want, someone who just absolutely is going to stink up the place like Quark. I want I want war.
You have to remember this isn't just a dark alley. This is a battle. They are in the middle of a firefight.
Well, it kind of was a dark alley. I mean, he's escorting a freighter convoy, and they get jumped. I mean,
The convoy is under attack. I mean, there are other enemy ships in the battle at the moment.
Right, the convoy is basically getting mugged in a dark alley.
The point I wanted to make is that nothing else mattered other than Worf's will at that point. If you're a Kantian, if you're a good Kantian, and Ben, deep down, I know you're a good Kantian. You're not a utilitarian. And at that point...
I'm not a utilitarian, but I support the concept of order and discipline in the military.
Well,
and I mean, if you put a soldier on trial for firing his weapon in a battle
without checking his target first,
well, when he's getting jumped in a battle,
that's kind of
wasn't getting jumped.
The battle had gone on for a little while.
Yeah, and this, I mean, that's a good point about but it's. You can't
if a ship decloaks right in front of you, I think it's not an unreasonable assumption to assume it's an enemy ship coming to attack you.
Right.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean it's not a question of him disobeying that order. I mean, the military needs order, sure, and it needs structure and it needs those rules, and Worf broke those rules, but he was in a position where he was supposed to break the rules. I mean, that's...
And let's also point out, though, that Worf fantasized about killing civilians.
Worf fantasizes about killing everyone. That's Worf.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's a Klingon. I don't think that's really...
It is relevant, because if you're interested in somebody's will, I mean, Kant makes the point. It's not wealth, it's not intellect, it's not... good health, it's not good effect. The only thing that matters behind the ethics of a judgment or the ethics of an action is the will behind it.
Well, but this is a difference though between what sort of thing might be right and wrong on a personal level and what sort of thing the government has proper business, or the military has proper business putting a man on trial for.
Now you're asking an interesting question.
When this has been what I've been trying to get to from the start. When Captain Sisko says that's a subjective issue that you can't try in a court of law, he had a valid point.
No, he didn't.
No,
the Federation Court of Law.
Yeah, well, Vulcan Court of Law, yeah, sure. In a Vulcan Court of Law, you can't do that. But in the Klingon Court of Law, you can affirm that Worf's heart was a belligerent heart. And I have sympathies. Politically, Ben, I'm probably nearer to you. Not on all issues. I've read your Facebook post, but on many issues. On a good many issues. And, at the end of the day, I'm probably a utilitarian when it comes to politics. But if you're a good Kantian, all I want to say is that the fact that Worf was really eager for combat, and this was unbecoming of a Starfleet captain, was enough for him to be extradited to the Klingon Empire if you're a Kantian. If you believe that, I mean, for example, the example, I can't remember, in a book, in my book, I think it was about a cat. But Bill chastised me for always bringing up my cat.
Bring up the cat. No, that's fine. I wasn't chastising. I was just looking forward to the sequel.
Observing.
You were observing. Okay, well, if I build a playground because I want kids to be happy, well, then I'm doing good. If I build a playground because there's a MILF right next to me who has a kid that wants to take it to the playground, well, I'm not that moral of a person, there's something underhanded going on.
What's in your heart that counts.
Yeah, exactly. I know what Kant's stuff is, but I don't think Kant would put a soldier on trial for shooting a guy who jumps up in front of him in the middle of a battle. I mean, you're supposed to defend yourself, in a battle when you get, suddenly attacked. I mean, otherwise, why have phasers on your ship at all?
Sure, no, Ben, I've already granted that. It's a stupid thing to do. If you're a freighter captain, you decloak in the middle of the battle, you deserve to die. There's no question about that.
There
You
it
have
is.
no-
It's on record.
Now,
Yeah,
let
it's on
me.
record. I've already granted that. What I'm saying is, given that the freighter captain deserved to die and he deserved to fail miserably at whatever he was hoping to accomplish, you now have Worf, who at the same time, does he deserve to be a Starfleet captain, given that the fact that he's a bloodthirsty human being, or Klingon being, whatever you are.
That might be a valid question to go over at his next performance review, but not to put him on trial for over this incident. And
Well,
yeah,
I mean, honestly, though, I mean, he kind of. I mean, it was right to put him on trial, but he should have been found not guilty because, I mean, he's a captain isn't just supposed to follow orders. A captain is supposed to give orders and decide what you're going to do and then order other people to do it. So you couldn't put Chief O'Brien on trial for this when Worf says fire and Chief O'Brien fires because Worf didn't actually pull the trigger. But Worf is the one where the responsibility lies.
Worf
Right.
would be responsible for disobeying orders in a mission or conduct unbecoming of a Starfleet captain. But I don't think that shooting at a decloaking ship that decloaks in the middle of a battle is conduct unbecoming of a Starfleet officer. I think any competent captain would have to do that in that situation.
Right. Now, let me ask, I want to ask Brandon this, since he says a Kantian would say Worf was guilty and should be extradited.
Yeah.
And it's because of what was in Worf's heart.
I love Kant.
Doesn't
You know how
what
his
was
name
in
is actually pronounced?
No.
Okay, continue.
I think I do, but I don't think we want to have Chris have to bleep out that much dialogue.
I'm sorry, what was that?
He's asking me if I know how Kant's name is really pronounced.
Oh,
Let's
okay.
just say
It's-
Ben would smell something fishy about
It's
the way.
Kant. It's Kant, I believe. Kant.
Sometimes I really like to get deep into Kant.
Okay, moving along. Something I wanted to ask
we're
you,
gonna
Kirby.
get sued.
What you mentioned last week that this episode is extremely similar, if not identical, to an original series episode. You mentioned Gideon. Is that Mark of Gideon, I think?
Well, you bet your ass. But Bill, and we'll discuss that absolutely. And I'm going to write that down in my notepad of things to discuss this episode. But Bill also had a question.
We don't have. We only got about 10 minutes or so left.
Okay, yeah, I was halfway through it. Okay, Kant would judge Worf based on the content of his heart. But
You're right.
it's not an isolated kind of thing. There were also the Klingons involved in the battle. Now, wouldn't the content of their hearts have any kind of impact in offsetting Kant's decision so that a Kantian ethical system would say Worf acted appropriately for the situation?
No, wouldn't.
Why not?
I don't.
And
Yeah,
I'll tell you what,
what
I'll
other
tell you
people
what.
do is not what other people do isn't relevant to your decisions. Everyone is his own rational moral agent. That's one of the principles of
Yeah, but
Kantianism.
Bill,
if
let
it
me
was
say.
if it was killing in self-defense, Kant would say that's acceptable, right?
But
Yes,
Bill,
I think he would.
I just want to say that ethically I agree with you, but Kant would not agree with you. I'm just saying I'm on your side here.
No, I mean that's what I'm.
Kant
But
is
I mean,
the bad
it's
cop. And
Kant would say that killing in self-defense is a justifiable kind of killing,
well, okay,
and that's a case where
fine.
the actions of the other person are relevant to the actions of the individual.
Okay, well let's look at Kant. We've got 10 minutes left. Excuse me. I've got to drink just a little bit of whiskey. Excuse me. Kant's belief was that ethics has to be absolute in order to have any moral imperative. I've already made this point. But in order for ethics to be absolute, when I decide on what sort of an action that I will undertake, I have to have in my mind that the action will be absolute, because I've already made the point that for Kant, for an ethical action to be ethical, it's got to be an absolute action. Because if it's relative, if it's situational, there's no obligation. If I say situationally I should do X, well, this just isn't that sort of a situation. Situationally I shouldn't kill people. Well, okay. Now there's somebody who's coming around. He's looking for Jews in my attic. I could kill him and bring about a higher good, but I won't, because killing is wrong. Unless you absolutize all of the moral force behind your principle, is undercut. Now with Kant, lying is immoral, because if everyone were to absolutely lie, the universe would be a miserable place to live in. And so we absolutize and we say no lying is permissible at all. Is this a better situation? Okay, well, now some stormtroopers are saying, are there any Jews in your attic? And what do? Do I tell the truth or do I lie? Well, the truth is there are Jews in my attic. But you know what? Maybe the right thing to do is to lie in this situation. And maybe I don't have to absolutize. But for Kant, you have to absolutize. You absolutely have to make the universal action. You've got to do that. In the grand scheme of things, the actual consequences of your action are not the important thing.
Right.
And so, you ask these wonderful questions with respect to Gideon, with respect to Worf, should he have fired, should he not have fired? Well, with Kant, irrelevant, absolutely irrelevant. The consequence is not the important part. It's whether or not you have done something that, if universalized, would bring about a greater universe. For Kant, that's everything. That is Kantian ethics. And I'm not saying he's right. I'm just saying that's the Klingon way. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I might point out on historical grounds that Immanuel Kant was not opposed to killing in all circumstances. He was, in many ways, for better or worse, sort of a lackey of the Prussian state some of the time. And the Prussian state tended to kill people for a number of different reasons.
Now, the Prussian state had outlawed his writings.
Well, it did? Really?
Good.
Well, that's okay. My understanding was that Kant was an advocate of moral order and the establishment in general. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the guy who was doing the lecture that I got the history of Kant from was totally wrong. Wait a minute. Wasn't there a regime change before the...
Yeah, there was a regime change.
We're talking about two different Prussian states then. Two different regimes.
Had been outlawed, and then there was a regime change, and Kant mostly had to do with theological reasons rather than philosophical.
Oh, yeah. They really hated the religion within the bounds of reason thing that you were talking about.
Religion within the limits of reason alone. You know, Ben, I really took the time to read the Book of Mormon. I did.
Hold on. You are bringing up something that's completely off subject. Yeah. We'll have to talk about that later. Anyway, what I was trying to say was Kant could have approved of killing in a number of different circumstances. His ethics are supposed to be you're supposed to be able to be a soldier and still have Kantian ethics. I mean, his ethics are not making being a soldier impossible. So there are some serious concerns about your analysis of Kant along those lines. On the other hand, I think you're right. Kant would talk about motive being more important in terms of whether an action was right or wrong. But I don't think Kant would approve of what's happening to Worf in this episode, where his decision is being second-guessed, I might add, largely based on the consequences. That's why he's on trial, is because, if it had actually been a decloaking Klingon ship, they wouldn't have put him on trial in the first place. So, right. I mean, the whole context makes the pseudo Kantian stuff that the Klingon lawyer says completely what's the word
Nullified.
yeah, I mean, it just seems to completely nullify any moral
Chris,
high ground he might have.
How much time do we have?
Oh, we've gone over at
Very
this point.
little.
I was going to make a point about how Klingons are chiefly concerned about the heart.
I think they are. That's true. I just think that this lawyer guy is not a good Klingon.
I think he's an excellent Klingon.
I think he's just saying a lot of these things, and he doesn't really believe a lot of the things he's saying.
Sometimes in my life, I think, boy, I'd love to be a Klingon. And I use this particular lawyer Klingon as my example.
Okay. Well, even though I disagree with a lot of the stuff in the episode, there's one thing in it that I think we ought to conclude on, and then we could talk about whatever else after this show. But it's the bit about the party they have to celebrate the fact that that Worf got off. They no longer they no longer have the threat of Worf being extradited and perhaps killed hanging over them. And Captain Sisko says something very wise, and that is that part of being a commander is keeping your troops happy, even when it's the last thing in the world you feel like doing. And I think that's really true. I think that's probably true for any leader. Yeah. There are times when as a leader you've got to do what's best for the morale of those under your command, even if you don't feel like it.
For sure. I remember my uncle actually runs a hotel, and on Christmas Day he goes in and he works a full shift, then he comes home. And the whole point of that, he doesn't have to. He's the guy who runs the place. If anybody disagrees, he can fire them, but he doesn't, because a good leader, he says, you know what, you have to work on Christmas and I'm here with you. A good leader is somebody who doesn't make rules for the employees that they themselves do not follow. That's what good leadership is all about. And sometimes you have to do things that are self-sacrificial as a leader. I mean, that's what Confucius says. Great leadership is leadership by example. It's not leadership by dictation. And that's a very important dictation. That's not dictation, but that's a very important distinction. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's getting on a different tangent there.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I thought that was a good thing to conclude on.
Well, I also want to hear what Chris wanted to say about Gideon, because
you didn't get to finish.
Come on, we've got time for Gideon.
If you've got just a few minutes, go ahead. If you can do it.
Oh, it was transparent brown panties. Chris, go ahead. What did you have to say about Gideon? The girl in Gideon. Don't tell me that you don't remember.
It's been a while since I've seen the episode. I apologize.
We'll have to do a separate episode on that.
Well, I just wanted to hear what, Kirby, you had something to say about it, didn't you? Or did you just want to draw the parallels?
I just want to think what are in brown panties. I don't know. With Gideon, there are enormous parallels because the leader was utilitarian. Because he made a decision that sacrificed his daughter for the greater good of the population. And all of a sudden, a Kantian would not understand that because, you have your duty towards your daughter. But the greater good lies towards what you could do for the population. It's the exact same ethical debate. It's just under an original series umbrage rather than a Deep Space Nine umbrage.
Okay.
Well, we can go further, but...
Well, I think that'll probably...
I know time is sparse.
Yeah, it is. And those of us who haven't seen Mark of Gideon in a long time will go back and watch it just to verify.
TOS is, a long time ago for me, too.
I just wanted to ask, this lawyer says when Worf goes to the Klingon Empire, I'll defend Worf and I'll do it to the best of my ability and I'll win, because he loves the fight. I like that about him. And when I saw that part, I was thinking, Worf's grandfather defended Captain Kirk when he was on trial in the Klingon Empire.
That's right.
Did
That's
Worf's grandfather really think Kirk was innocent, or was he just doing his job?
Wait,
The
that was
honorable
doing
Worf's.
his job.
That was Worf's grandfather.
Oh, you're not
Yes.
in the know, are you?
Yeah, that was.
Ben, you're not in the
It
know.
was played by Michael Dorn. His name was Worf, and it was 70, 80 years ago. Because Worf is the son of Moog. Moog is the son of Worf.
Can I just say something that might resonate with one of you? And I don't expect all three of you, but I hope one of you. Isn't it possible? I thought thrice he said, "Is it possible?" And I know of more than one non-Trekker who had seen that episode. And whenever you bring up Star Trek, that's what they bring up. Isn't it possible? That Cisco was so...
I think he just said, "Is it possible?" He didn't have the negative in there.
Well, we'll have to arm wrestle about that whenever I come to whatever state you live in. I'm pretty sure it was "isn't it," but I just find that he really went overboard with the acting on that one.
Oh yeah, that is amazing stuff. It was great acting all through the episode.
Well, there you have it.
Okay.
That just made me think of something. The whole scene where that lawyer tries to get Worf angry.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't he using Worf as a means rather than as an end there? I mean, there's just so many times when this lawyer guy seems to be violating, the categorical imperative 101. I mean, it just I don't know how you get into this. Just because somebody talks about motive doesn't make them a Kantian.
Before we get back into debating this.
Yeah, this is the last 30 seconds of the podcast. I'd love to discuss that at length.
Bill, can you give us an outro?
That's all the time we have for tonight, folks. Join us next week for another exciting episode. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, email us at trekosophy@gmail.com. Keep tuning in, send us your feedback. Check out our new site. We've done some modifications and tweaks, and we've modified the phase variants a little bit, so hopefully things will run smoother.
Did you reverse the polarity?
No. That's next week's overhaul.
Next week's overhaul.
Yeah.
Well, do all
It's on the schedule.
Otherwise, do all the things. Otherwise, we're going to frame you for mass murder. And
Yes.
Yeah.
And remember, keep coming here because, we're here to investigate the truth, and you can't handle the truth. Everybody else has to film their own You Can't Handle the Truth. Maybe somebody can do a better Jack Nicholson than me.
You can't handle the truth.
Bill's is better. Sorry, Ben.
Well, I don't remember what movie I was going to see, but I was in theaters, and this dude's coming out. Him and his whole group were in line for the Titanic.
Right.
And he says, they did really well on the special effects for this to make the scene where the ship sinks look as realistic as possible. And I turned around and I says, "Oh, the ship sinks? Thanks. You just ruined the movie for me. You just had to blurt it out, didn't you?"
Man, what Canadian shows do you watch? Because Canadian TV sucks. I can't imagine why. Bill's
That was weird. It was, I heard, "Can you give us an out?" And I'm thinking, okay, this is Max Headroom bringing you this episode of Trekosophy. God, that's gonna haunt me now. I just know it.
Unfortunately, I have to sit in this horrible chair that was designed in hell.
The horse sitting in a chair. Oh.
And if they catch you with that hockey puck on your hard drive, oh, you're in trouble.
Hey guys,
Yes.
Darth Vader is Luke's father.
No.
In the Star Trek fandom system, episodes are analyzed by two groups: the Trekkies, who look at the plots, and the philosophers, who look at the moral lessons. These are their stories.